you want to master the art of job hunting? Join me and explore proven strategies and success stories with a recruiter turned career coach, Karishma Dandona Sethi. In today's episode, we will unveil the secrets of successful job interviews. Karishma will shed light on common job seeker mistakes, on effective interview strategies, strategies to cope with rejection, mastering your negotiation skills, and leveraging personal brandings. She will also touch upon emerging market trends. So keep watching and enjoy this episode. Joining us today on our podcast is a seasoned professional who has spent 18 years navigating the intricate world of talent acquisition. Starting her career as a recruiter, she honed her skills in identifying the right candidates and successfully placing them in top tier companies across a diverse range of industries. With a wealth of experience and expertise in recruitment, she now serves as a renowned career coach, a certified resume writer, a LinkedIn optimization specialist, and an interview coach. She is Karishma Dandona Sethi. Hello, Karishma. Welcome on my podcast.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you so much for a wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to be interviewed by you.
It's all my pleasure, Karishma, and I've been waiting for this day. And because I have so many questions for you, not just career-wise, but also wanting to know more about you as a person. So let me get started with your career journey. Could you tell us a little about your journey from being a recruiter to becoming a career coach? What inspired this transition?
Wow, I definitely I love sharing this part of my journey because this was really a very tough period time when we all were facing this pandemic, that is COVID. And COVID happened, I was working at that moment, but because of the the halt in the hiring, I kind of had to quit from my job, and I would say I lost my job during that time. So when that happened, I initially the first few months were really difficult. I was really anxious because the working woman and the workaholic in me couldn't sit still at home. I was, literally petrified. What do I do now? And there was nothing, that was happening at that particular moment. So, 3 months it was just a struggle. I decided what do I do, just figuring out things, and suddenly I stumbled upon this opportunity to work as a resume writer as a freelancer. So initially I worked as a resume writer for a company, and started my journey from there. So when I did that, the first time I felt okay, when I wrote that first resume, I realized okay, there's something else that I can do which can also help people in some way. From there my journey started. I slowly started doing it as a side hustle. I did get a job as a recruiter, but I still wanted to do something different. So that's when I started, and started writing resumes and LinkedIn profiles, and I started coaching people as well. I mean, that was my first client who told me, and he said, "Why don't you coach me?" I said, "Okay, I've never coached anyone before, but I did always used to guide my candidates who used to go for an interview to my client's place. I used to guide them during that journey." So that's when it happened, and slowly I kind of slowly got into this role, and I started like getting really excited with the fact that I was able to help people, able to build up their confidence, guide them in a certain way on how to be in an interview, how to act in an interview, how to present themselves in an interview. Because I'd seen a lot of interviews, I'd taken a lot of interviews, so I said, why don't I share that knowledge that I'd gained over these years to help a candidate secure a good job. So that's how it turned out, and that's why I'm here, and I've been lucky to have actually guided so many people in this journey.
Right. And with my conversation with past few coaches that I've interviewed, this has been a similar story where, you are not choosing coaching as a career. And I think coaching just chooses you because of what
Absolutely.
traits, what experiences you're bringing along. And that's so wonderful. With that extensive experience in talent acquisition that you have, what are some of the common mistakes you see job seekers making during the application as well as the interview process?
Right. So first, when they apply, is that I see a lot of people applying to the job that is not even relevant to their particular role. Right. Say the first mistake is they don't read the job description. They just look at the job title, maybe the location, and they just hit the apply button. So even today, when I hire for some of my clients, I see I get so many irrelevant applications. So it's really difficult for a recruiter, from a recruiter standpoint, to see, okay, I've posted a job, but half of it is just, for them it's of no use, right? So that's the first biggest mistake, that they don't read the job description carefully and they don't apply to the to the right job. So, and then they say, okay, I've applied for so many jobs and I don't get a call back, and they put the blame on the recruiter or the company that they're not reverting with the feedback. So that is the number one mistake. Second, of course, is that don't see that they negotiate really well with the uh, recruiters or the hiring managers when it comes to their salary. That's also a big gap. People are really scared to ask their salary, and in fact, I was also one of them when I started my journey, because nobody taught me how to negotiate, right? We didn't have that kind of information available, at least when I started my journey in 2005, that this is how you should negotiate. This is what you deserve, and you should ask for it. And that's the second mistake that they make. First is while applying, and last, and then when they actually can't negotiate properly with, and actually find their worth in that company, and why do they deserve that.
Yeah, talking of negotiation, this is one common thing that we've seen. The hiring HR. The HR is the first round that they have, and when they have the conversation with the prospective job seeker, they would want to know what is their current salary. They would want to know what is their expected salary. But in turn, they do not give the candidate or the job seeker information as to what is their maybe range that they are looking for, what is their own budget for that particular role. So they do not share that information, but the expectation is the other way around. How can candidates manage or deal with these kind of questions? What's the best way to answer a CTC question by the HR?
In fact, I've also been in this place where I've asked this question to my candidates, and then they have to answer. And when they ask me what's the budget, and I say it's open. I've been in that place, and I've done that already. So it's just the recruiter trying to get that information to see whether it's really worth putting you across or not. So, for example, if the CTC budget is 15 lakhs. Okay, that's the max they can offer, or 50 lakhs with them, whatever is the package. If that is a max that they can offer. They would always look at a person who's, under, I mean, at least I used to do that. Then I used to look at a person who's at least drawing, say, for example, it is 50 lakhs. So I would look at someone who's currently at least sitting at 40, so that he gets a decent hike. That's my thought process behind approaching a person. Still, what happens is many times candidates do not share the exact range. So, I mean, if there's a salary is 40 lakhs, it is possible that your salary is actually 32 and then 8 lakh is variable. To get that information, recruiters tend to ask you what is your compensation and whether you really match, are you within the budget expected or not. So, from a candidate standpoint now, if you get this question from a recruiter, you should always say, I want to know what is the budget for your company, what is your company hiring. I'm sure there would be a budget that this is the upper limit. We can't go beyond this. I would like to know, because my salary has been just for so many years. I need to understand what's the market. I've done some research about the kind of salary that I should be getting based on my experience and my education and the kind of company that I'm working in or the industry that I'm working in. So I have a certain ballpark figure in my mind. So I would like to know whether I fit into that budget or not. Only then it would make sense for me to share further details. So why don't you please share what the company is offering? I'm sure the recruiter will tell you, because they need a candidate, and then they'll be in a spot. Okay, what do I say now? And it has
Yeah.
happened with me. Few of the very few candidates who really were good at negotiation, they did this trick with me, and I really felt okay. Yeah, that's a good way to get out that information from a recruiter.
Yeah, and I think this is very rare. It does happen, but rarely. Very few HR would openly give you a number or at least help you out decide that, because I think it is fair for even a candidate to know how much they can expect, how much they can ask for. Because if they ask for something which is out of the park for that company or that role, they just get ruled out right in the first round without even knowing. But there are companies who are open to, even if you ask for an 80% hike, but the candidate will not be able to gauge that if the HR is not being helpful in that way. And I think it's quite unfair to mostly rely on what a candidate is coming with, what is their current CTC, and that's from where we will give you a particular percentage hike. Because maybe in the past the candidate hasn't been negotiating, they have gone through circumstances where they were at a not so good position, or the companies have taken advantage, or whatever may be the reason, they have not been paid well, they have always been underpaid. Now they want to level up, they want to be at par with the market and other peers in their category, and they are applying for a job that they know they are worth the pay, and they have those skills. But if the company or the HR is going to just value you based on what you're coming with, what's your current package, I think that's quite unfair. What work is the candidate going to do in your company? That's the range that should be considered, I feel. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I will actually. This is a very tricky situation where the HR is actually not the decision maker in terms of when it comes to what package that the person should give. When I say HR, there are certain people in the HR domain where they design the structure, the compensation structure for the company. Okay, so that is done at a very top level. So there are very senior people who do that, who do the benchmarking of what's happening in the industry, and then they decide. And that is only in larger organizations. But as compare it to the mid-level or junior, just startups, or I would say there is no such structure done. There's no such benchmarking done. So for those organizations, the decision makers are normally the hiring managers or the founders of the company. Or if it's a owner driven organization, then it's the owner who decides what should be the package. There's no benchmarking done that so for those companies, yes, it's going to be very difficult for a candidate to justify whether I deserve this or not, because they are not going to budge from that budget unless they struggle for 6 months and they're not able to close anyone. Then they might maybe increase the budget for just by a few lakhs. But for a larger organization, like they do have benchmarking done. They have a proper understanding of what's happening in the industry, what's the package in India, what's the package globally, and are they giving a proper everything is at the is it at the same level for all the people who are working in that organization. So it also depends on which company are you applying for. So if you fall under that category of lower to mid-level companies where it's the decision maker is not the HR and not and the hiring manager or the owner or the founder of the company, then it's going to be difficult to gauge at that particular moment. So, but what I always suggest is go on Glassdoor, go on AmbitionBox, check the reviews, check what's happening in terms of the salary. The salary insights are there. LinkedIn Insight has salary insights. So just check that and then do a comparison of your experience as compared to what's the average. There also you will get only the average. You will not get the exact number. So once you do that, you will get some clarity and you can speak accordingly.
And talking of going on Glassdoor and all, what are the strategies you would suggest, a candidate follows for researching about a company? What are the things they can do before going for an interview?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. Glassdoor is a very good platform. Ambition Box is there. You can check out their LinkedIn page, see the number of employees, see what's happening in terms of the posts and all. So you get some trending news. There's definitely one feature that I always suggest is Google Alerts. You whatever company you're targeting, you put in an alert for that company, and whatever recent updates or latest news that's coming up for that company, you will just get that information in your inbox. So that's also best way to keep yourself updated about the company, what's happening. So you can utilize that information in the interview. Like if you're going for an interview, would say, yeah, I just heard about your organization. You've just been funded by so and so, and that's really great to hear. That's so that the company or the interviewer will feel, oh, this person is prepared. They know about us. That's a good way to create that impression.
So now, in addition to researching about the company, what are some other aspects of interview preparation that the candidates would often overlook, but these are significant in impacting their performance?
They don't actually focus on uh, positioning themselves as the right candidate for them. And of course, they want that's the whole purpose, but they do not try to showcase at what value I can add in your organization. So if I want to work with you, what can I bring to the table? They will talk about their responsibilities. I've done this, I've done that, but how has it helped the company, current company, and what they can offer to the next organization? That's always missing. And that to showcase that, you need to have a certain level of confidence, a certain level of storytelling, so that it helps you bring out that story. So that I think is missing, and that's where I help a lot of my candidates because and my clients, I would say, that helping them with the storytelling aspect. How do you become a storyteller? How do you build up your confidence to address this, and make sure that you stand out in front of the interviewer amongst the other people? That's the important aspect, which I coach actually in my sessions with my students as well as my clients. So yeah.
Right. And so yeah, they need to learn how to strike that balance between, showcasing their unique expertise and experience, and at the same time addressing the specific needs of the company or the hiring manager. But we have also, at least I have come across some interviews where the hiring manager may not be a seasoned interviewer. So they may not ask you the right questions that will be able to extract the answers from the candidate,
Right.
that will help the hiring manager better pick, be able to gauge and say, okay, this is the right candidate. They would ask very generic kind of questions. So in such kind of cases, what can a candidate do to make sure? And sometimes, even the JD won't be very elaborate.
Right.
So the candidate cannot figure out few things. So what can the candidate do in such cases?
So first is when the interviewer is not so experienced, the introduction has to be strong. So when we also call it the elevator pitch. So when you're introducing yourself, the tell me about yourself question, that's a very good start because that's the first question. So that's a good place to showcase your ability and your what value you can add. Second is towards the end of the interview as well, when they ask you, so do you have any questions for me? That's when also that's a place where you can showcase your interest and showcase how really enthusiastic and excited you are about that opportunity. Of course, throughout the experience, I would say, how do you deal with a recruiter? How do you follow up? And the follow up is really important because sometimes candidates don't even follow up. They feel that, okay, if I get selected, I'll get a call. I mean, because they've been so through that kind of experience. So having a good follow-up method is strategy is also important. So these are different ways you can showcase that you're really excited about this opportunity. Like after the interview, send a message or a email to the recruiter saying, thank you so much for interviewing me today. I really enjoyed the conversation. And I would really, I look forward to working with you. What did you learn from that? This will showcase okay, this guy is really serious or this girl is really serious about this opportunity, and looks like he's going to do a job. If he gets this job, he's going to do an excellent job. He's going to work really hard for it. And in my 18 years of experience, honestly, I've only come across one such person who has done this follow up or a thank you message. And I was really shocked that why don't people do this often, right? And in fact, honestly, when I started, even I did not know about all these, right? I was just a recruiter. But when I actually, in my last three jobs, I would say, so since 2018, I would say, I kind of followed this method, and it really gave me the results. So that's why I encourage people to do this. This is a very good way to stand out.
Right. So, yeah, following up is very important, but how often can a candidate follow up, or how much time should they wait before making their first move and reaching out?
Right. So thank you mail has to be, or message has to be sent right after the interview, like maybe a few hours or after, or maybe the following day, based on what they have given as a time frame. Like, say for example, if you ask, so when can I expect to hear back from you, and they say it's like, we'll get back to you in like 4 days or 5 days. Based on that, you send the next follow-up mail after the time frame that has been given. So if they say 4 days, after the fourth day, you send the first follow-up mail on the feedback. Then you still don't get a response, then another 2 days, and then you send a follow-up mail. You should at least follow up 4 times. Beyond that, then there's no scope. If you don't get a response after that, then you can assume that you have not got through. So 4 times is the follow-up that you should actually ideally do. Okay. Of course, and the follow-up has to be very soft. It should not be like a hard follow-up that you're doing. That is also really, that's not a sign of being standing out. That's a sign of desperation. So that does not look good.
Could you share maybe some specific strategies or coping mechanisms that candidates can, follow to deal with setbacks or moments of self-doubt along their journey when they're searching for jobs?
I tell this a lot to my candidates, and I don't know why I keep saying candidates, my clients, that searching for a job is a full-time job in itself, right? So it's a very anxious process. I've been through that. So the only coping mechanism, works is reiterating yourself and telling yourself that you can do it. You are worth it. You are unique. You have that talent. So also a lot of self-evaluation is important. So when you evaluate, if there's anything that is missing, upskill, and you will get that job what you desire, but it will take time. It could be like maybe this company, you really wanted a particular job, you did not get it, but that's not the only company, right? So there are many opportunities, and you will get many opportunities in the future as well. It's just that some people it takes a little less time, or some people it takes a little longer time. So one is, of course, don't lose that self-belief. Believe in yourself. Keep evaluating yourself if there's anything missing, so that you can upskill and stay in the game, so that you get more opportunities. And of course, which helped me also a lot, is positive mindset. Being positive, giving yourself those positive affirmations really help, because when you are in that process, believe me, Jennifer, it's really a dark period. You do get a lot of self-doubt, because if you don't get a job for 1 month, you're trying 2 months, you're trying 3 months, you'll start feeling that, okay, you're not worthy enough, you're not good enough. These are the thoughts people get, right? So that's the time when you actually have to not focus on the negative part. You have to focus on the positive outcomes and have a positive mindset, because only positive mindset or thoughts will lead to positive outcomes. I believe a lot in positive affirmations, and I use that on myself, and I ask my daughter to use it. So it really helps you. But like I said, the other things also, like you have to keep evaluating, upskilling if required.
Right now, I'm going to ask you a question more on the interviewer side. Now, you would have, as a recruiter, interviewed multiple candidates.
Yes.
And a few candidates you would have come across who are excellent speakers. They come across confident, energetic. They showcase all the enthusiasm to take up that role. Now, once you onboard them, you have hired them, they are onboarded. there are very few percentage of these kind of candidates who you would think were not the right choice, because they may continue to have that excellent speaking skills, confidence, that enthusiasm, but for whatever reason to doing the job, they don't do it. Maybe it's laziness, disinterest, whatever it be. So going forward, how do you filter out such kind of candidates? How would you identify the genuine ones from just the talkers?
So you're, and honestly, from a recruiter's standpoint, it's how the first interaction is. The first interaction is the most important aspect. So when in my experience as a recruiter, I've seen that the first call that you make to a candidate, and then they accept they pick up the call, the way they interact, that's when you start filtering out, you start analyzing. People don't realize it. People think, okay, it's just the interview. But from the first call itself, the recruiters start analyzing the person as a person, not just a candidate. Because how you interact, the way you speak, your tone of voice, everything is important. So most of the times we can figure out, okay, this guy is not good, or they're just, they're not confident enough, or they're not, I would say, they have a certain attitude which is not good. They are not a good team player. All those are really visible. But when it comes to the interview, yes, the interviewer may ask certain questions, may ask certain behavioral interview questions by which they can gauge. Of course, people do lie also at times, in these kind of situations, because they have to cook up a story. And if they're good at storytelling, like you said, they're expert talkers, they can cook up that story. But when it actually comes to, interview, you should always, so for certain level of positions, I would suggest that give them an assignment, ask them to, maybe uh, do a proper, whatever demonstration of the work, if based on the role that they're at. So what we used to do is we used to give them projects, and we used to ask them to create a presentation based on the role, whatever their role in. Project really works, because that's when we can see whether they are really interested. First is because when they complete the project, and believe me, Jennifer, half of the people used to not even call back after that, because they didn't want, they thought that, okay, they're just wasting time, or they were not confident enough to do it. Give them some assignment, something to do, so that we feel that the interviewer feels that, okay, yes, this is the right candidate. That also shows interest, and then also gives us the confidence in order to see whether they will actually be able to perform that job or not. Like make a business plan, make a plan on how you're going to present it to the client, whatever. It could be anything of that sorts. Or you can even ask them to, why don't you come and meet us and see how our work is? Why don't you, make, have those kind of meetings, so that you see what do you think about this? What's your thoughts on this? And I've seen the companies, larger companies, certain who have certain expectations. They want to hire a certain quality of candidate. They do follow a lengthier process of interviewing, where they actually get to know the candidate in and out. In fact, recently I was working with an organization. I closed a position. So this is a head of operations. So for that, they actually called the candidate to the factory to see how it looks like, and that's when you also gauge the behavior. Like you said, how are they really the right candidate, or they're just talking about it, or they really walk the talk as well.
Right.
So yeah, that's my experience, and that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah. So would you say that a lengthier interview process helps identify, it's a better way of interviewing a candidate?
For critical roles, I would say, not for all. It's not required for all, right? But if you're hiring someone which is a very critical role, and you really want to make sure that you're not going to make a decision, hiring decision, which will eventually cost you, after a few, maybe in 3 months, or then it's easier, to do it in a lengthier way. So it's easier for you, don't have to go through that process again.
Right. So you specialize in industries like BFSI, EdTech, FinTech. How do job search strategies vary across these different industries, and what advice do you have for the candidates targeting specific sectors?
Okay, so job search strategies from I would say, see, a job search strategy is more personal, as in personal job search strategy rather than an industry specific job search strategy. It is not related to a industry. It is more of what I want to do in terms of my next career goal. So setting your priority. What is your short term goal? What is your long term goal? Now this is from a candidate standpoint. If I am looking for certain role in the what is the next 2 years I want to do a particular job. So for example, in the next 2 years, I want to do only coaching. So I will focus on those aspects, right? But in the larger, uh, longer vision, I would say on a long-term goal, I want to run a business. So that would be something I'll work towards that. So my current strategy should work on what am I going to whatever aim that I have or the short-term goal that I have. I will have to first identify those companies based on that goal. Which are those companies which can help me achieve this goal, right? So I will make a list of those companies and then I will work and identifying which are these companies, where are they located, what are the kind of opportunities available, am I fitting that bill? If they have that opportunity, do I fit the bill or not? If there's anything that is missing in my skill set, can I upskill? Can I do something, do an additional course which will make me eligible for that particular option? That is a job search strategy. It is nothing, I would not say it's rocket science. It is just that you have to do a lot of self evaluation, mapping your career, goal setting, doing a SWOT analysis for yourself. All of that is job search and strategy. And then identifying those companies and then approaching. How do you approach? That's also the next strategy. How do you approach them? That's how a job strategy would work, and irrespective of the industry, it does not matter which industry are you focusing on. But yes, you need to see this trend, which industry hiring the most. So maybe you are in a role which is applicable for different industries. It's not specific to an industry. If you're in a sales role, you could do sales for different industries. So you could change the industry. That could also be a part of your job search strategy. Okay, enough. I've done enough insurance sales. Now let me go try something else. Go in a different industry which can maybe skyrocket my salary. It can help me get a better position. It can help me get a better designation, or the better salary. So that is basically a job search strategy in a way. What is your own personal goal, short term and long term? Based on that, you decide, make a plan.
That makes sense, actually, to self introspect first, because even if we just go with what is the trend happening, if it doesn't align with your own goals, then you're not going to, enjoy doing what you're doing. So that's a very valid point there. Could you share three keys that all candidates should carry with them in their pocket when they're going for an interview?
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I would say 3 C's, because confidence, calmness, and composure. These are the 3 C's I would say. Confidence, these are really important, because if you're not calm and you'll be like, okay, how am I going to say, you'll fumble a lot. So that's, you have to be calm and composed and, confident during the interview. So these are the 3, I would say, C's instead of keys. But yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
That's wonderful. Could you share a unique story, maybe a must share kind of a success story of one of your clients?
Okay, there are many actually, but yeah, this is one really interesting story, and this is my first client, I would say. So when I started writing my resumes and all, so what I did is I just posted on LinkedIn that I'm a resume writer, and I used to get on and off. I used to get some inquiries whether can you write a resume or not. I said yeah, yeah. So I got a client where he started off by saying he wants to rewrite his resume or revamp his resume. I said okay. When I got on a call with him and he said, okay, can you help me with my LinkedIn profile as well? I said, okay. And then eventually he asked me whether I'll be able to coach him for the interview. And believe me, he was a very senior professional with 25 years of experience, working with top-notch companies like Nestle, Reliance, Bharti Airtel. So I was like, okay, you're so experienced and you're such a senior person, you work with so many top-notch companies, why do you need an interview coach? So he said, all these companies that I've worked with, I've always been referred to. I've never actually gone through the entire interview process. So it was like my ex-boss was working here. He moved there and then he called me there like that. That's how the process was. So now that he's actually going out in the market, job market, he doesn't have any clue. He has no clue about the entire process. So I said, okay, why not? And that was my first client. I had never coached anyone before that. So I worked on, my PPT. What am I going to share? What content am I going to share with him? What are the aspects I'm going to cover? I did that, and I started, of course, with the resume and LinkedIn and cover letter. And then when it came, I took him through the entire process, the entire recruitment cycle, so that he gets an idea. I coached him on all the STAR methods. How do you introduce yourself? The body language. Once that was done, that entire journey was 3 months. So 3 months I coached him. The fourth month, I did not hear from him. We did some mock interviews, 4-5 mock interview sessions, and then after that, since he was also traveling, he was a senior person, so he was always on travel at sometimes. So fourth month, I did not hear from him. The fifth month, he calls me and he tells me that, Karishma, I've got a job. Thank you so much for your, the way you coached me and all, for all the knowledge that you've shared. I've secured a job, and now he's still in touch with me. In fact, he's now looking out for a job again after so many years. So he's like, I really want your help again. And he's all over my LinkedIn. He sent a review, personal review as well, and he always comments on my posts. So that's it was really interesting for me, because he was my first client. And why I am very proud of this is also because he was such a senior person, and I was able to guide him in the right direction, and that really was a happy moment for me as well. So yeah, that was a success story.
Yeah, I think our first companies, first clients are always the dearest to heart.
That's the precious.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick pause here, Karishma, and I'm going to give you a number range. You have to pick a number, and I'm going to ask you an off-guard question just to break the momentum before we move into our next segment. So if you could pick a number between 1 to 5 for me, please.
Okay, 5.
All right. What's the most random fact that you know?
Random fact? Okay. Oh, I'm really bad with all these things. I really can't think of it anywhere right. Okay, can we try another question?
Sure. All right, let me think of another one, or pick another number. Give me another number.
Okay, 3. Yeah,
all right.
I hope you're not put all tough questions here.
No, not at all. What's the weirdest or most unusual talent you have?
Weirdest or most unusual talent?
Something that nobody knows, but it's fun. You enjoy doing it, but maybe others think it's weird, or you think that the others may perceive it that way.
Okay, no, I actually sometimes I feel I don't have any talent, but yeah, okay, that is it possible for people to be without talent?
I think everyone's talented. It's just that they don't realize what talents they have in their pockets.
I think my talent is that a weird talent is that I can actually read people through their body language. I don't know it. I know it's not weird, but many people do it as a profession. But for me personally, I feel it is sometimes I feel like I'm a psychic.
That is a gift, I would say.
Yes, when I look at a person's face, and I just can figure out what's happening at that particular moment. And I mean, 90% of the times I'm correct. So, or maybe that 10% people don't tell me that that yeah, you're right. But that's a weird talent, and I get surprised, and in fact I am actually surprised by this talent, because I've realized it very recently in the last couple of years, that I can actually read people through their body language or their facial expressions.
Hmm. So, do
Yes.
you think your profession, working so long, interacting with people, trying to understand and gauge candidates, that
Maybe.
has helped you build this, or maybe you had this talent and that has helped you in your career?
Okay. Yeah, I think it could be both, but yes, since the past almost 3-4 years now, 4 years to be honest, that I've been doing a lot of coaching and speaking to people. Of course, before that also I was speaking, but not so much on a virtual basis. But yeah, I did a lot of interviews, so I think that plus the recent development of coaching, because coaching involves a lot of emotional involvement as well, right? Because when I have to build someone's confidence, it can't just be superficial. I have to actually build that confidence from within. So I think because of that, I think I've got this weird talent of reading people's reading
Yeah,
people's
I
mind.
wouldn't call it weird, but yeah, it's definitely a gift.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
wonderful. All right, let's move on to our next segment, Karishma, and we just shift gears. We'll delve deeper into your personal side of your story. Um, your professional journey has been very impressive, and I just want to understand a little more about the person behind that expertise. So, could you take us back to the moment when you lost your job due to COVID and the pandemic, and the subsequent lockdowns? What emotions were you experiencing at that time, and how did you initially cope up with all those emotions?
Okay, so initially it was anxiety, stress, I would say. And fortunately, my boss had allowed me to keep the laptop for some time, because even after I lost the job, because I thought I could do something online. I could do something with that laptop. I had my husband used to sleep, and I used to sit with my laptop on, try to figure out what can I do next. That I was so crazy, and I was such a workaholic because I have always been an independent person. My mother taught me one thing, because she was a housewife. Although she was well educated, but she was always a housewife, right? A homemaker, I would say. So she always used to tell me, "Okay, Karishma, not, no matter what, you have to work. You cannot be a homemaker. You have to do something. You have to be independent." And because of that, that was actually that always had was in my mind, so I used to be online and to try to figure out what else can I do. Can I do something else? Like I said, can I upskill myself and change and do something new? uh, you know I you, so that was stress, anxiety. uh, you know I and I think that the best way I coped up with that was, I also, in fact, because I was under so much stress, I did go took a 10-day course on Vipassana. I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, Vipassana. So it's a 10-day course. You go to a secluded place where uh, you are not talking to anyone for 10 days. You've cut off from social media. You're cut off from everyone. You can't talk. Even the people who are there, who are doing the same course, who are doing the meditation along with you, you can't even talk to them. So I did that 10-day course in Feb, and that kind of, it really helped me, I would say. So it really helped me become more positive, understand the value of self evaluation, because you are alone with your thoughts. You can't even speak to anyone. You can only speak to yourself. You're alone in a room, apart from the meditation that you do. So, and that really helped me. And when I came back from there, I started my search again, and I got the job. So I think being with yourself, evaluating, thinking about yourself in the skills that you have, giving yourself that pep talk, that really helped me. So that's how I coped up. But yes, initially it was anxiety, stress, and then that's how I coped up with it. Being more positive.
Hmm. Yeah, I understand the part where, cutting off from social media and all would help in such circumstances because you don't see the outside world of who's getting promoted or who's getting a job.
Yeah.
So you would avoid any kind of comparisons with yourself. So that would definitely help. But if you are to yourself alone and you are in this kind of a situation, I'm just trying to think, wouldn't that also make you, overthink on, I don't have a job. What am I good for? What next? So wouldn't these thoughts try and fill your head more in a lonely kind of a situation? And or did this course have guiding steps? Of course, you couldn't speak. So how does that course actually work to help you think in a positive way?
Yeah. So, of course, I'm not saying that everyone should do this Vipassana course. I did that because I was under tremendous stress. But how it helped me is, after the course, I mean, when you do the entire course, right before you go to your room and go back to sleep, they had this, a video played on where the founder of this Vipassana, not the founder exactly, the person who was teaching this, the teacher, I would say, uh, Mr. S.N. Goenka, he used to come on video and he used to talk about his experiences, things, and which were really positive, and which will really put yourself under that, question your behavior, question how you think about others, about yourself, and that positive mindset is not just for a particular aspect. See, you can't be positive only for your job and not for others. You have to have a positive mindset overall for yourself, right? So if you are positive about yourself, you will be happy and positive, think positively about everything, even your family, even your job, your career, whatever you're doing. So a positive mindset is for yourself and for others, how you look at others. It's not just for you. It's not just for a particular job that you should get a job. And I also, so that helped me just to be more positive, because I was negative before that. I was always like, what am I doing, why am I not getting a job, why is it? These are negative mindsets. You're feeding your mind with negativity. When you
Right.
feed your mind with positivity, you will get a positive outcome.
Mm.
So the bottom line is, you do Vipassana or you don't do a Vipassana. That's not the point. You be positive. That was the, that's what I meant basically. You be positive, think positively about yourself, and like I said earlier, also evaluate yourself. If you're missing something, please upskill yourself and go in that direction. So that is how you cope with it. You can't crib and expect everything to be good. You have to, if you want good things to happen, you have to think good as well, right? You have to have a positive mindset.
Right. As they say, what you give out to the universe comes to you. Keeping that positive mindset, putting it out to the world there, that brings and you attract those kind of energies as well. And I think that is one school of thought. And the other way, if you do not believe in these things, what other thing would work, I would say, is when you are thinking positively, you are not stuck in that situation, in that moment, nor in the past. You're thinking about the future, what you could do.
Yes.
So you are actually working towards the goal or improvement. So that's what helps people, I think, right?
Yeah, and you just don't have to think positive. You have to take action as well. It's not
Right.
just about thinking. It's just sitting there and meditating and thinking positive. That doesn't work. You have to
Right.
take action. That's what I did, right? When I came back from my Vipassana 10 days and I was away from my two kids, right? So that was really a tough period for me also, because being away from your children that were so young, it was really difficult. But I came back, I took action, I started my search, and whatever, I mean, I implemented certain new strategies. I don't know how it came to me. I did something which I'd never done before, and it worked for me, and I got a job within a week.
Mm.
So
Wonderful.
that's how it works, So when you are with yourself, you get those thoughts, you get ideas on how to work,
Right.
you get more clarity, I would say, rather,
Mm.
what you should do next.
Right. That's true. So transitioning from being employed to starting your own venture, this can be quite daunting, and you have small kids as well. So how did you navigate this emotional challenge and uncertainty, and fear of transitioning into something new?
So this is really one very important aspect, because when actually when I started my, so I said I from 2021 I've been freelancing. So I've been working by myself. I've been working with associate by associating with other edtech companies where I coach their students. So yeah, it's been a I will not say difficult journey. It's not been very easy also. Yeah, but there have been some months where it has been really good. Some have been really bad. But the whole idea is why am I, because I enjoy doing this. That's why I'm doing it. And of course, I keep on searching new ideas and new ways on how I can improve my business life as well. I've been fortunate that I have a good, loving mother-in-law who takes care of my kids. So when I'm working, so she's, she takes care of them. So that's something that is really, makes me focus on my work. Otherwise, it would be difficult. I'm sure you know how it is with two kids. If you don't have a support system, it's not for any woman entrepreneur. It's really difficult. Uh, they need that support system, and I'm being fortunate that I have that support system in the form of my mother-in-law and my husband. So that has because of that support, I think I can work hard, and now is the time to work hard so that my kids can get the bright future that they deserve.
Right, right. And when I remember in one of your interviews, you mentioned about when you received your first opportunity of writing a resume. I think it was for about just 400 rupees, right?
Awesome.
And what was going through your mind at that time? Did you have any kind of doubts or hesitation about starting your own business at that moment? What were the thoughts that went through?
No, so the first time when I got that 400 rupees, I just wanted to do something, and I wanted to see if I could do something new, because I'd been doing the same thing, recruitment, for the last 15 years. So I just thought in my mind that, okay, can I do something new? Which do I have something else as a talent, like you asked, right? So I thought it is a learning phase. So I said, okay, for the 400 to 400, say, let me take it. I will be happy with that. Then slowly I realized, okay, and it's not that I did not learn. I did a lot of learning myself. I upskilled myself. I did a lot of courses on how to write a resume. And it's not that you can decide one day, get up and I'm going to write resumes. You have to do a lot of self learning. I believe during that phase I did some 12 odd courses so that I can learn so much, so that I can share that learning with other people. So yes, it was good. It was interesting. What made me get into myself is after, I think 2021, I lost my mother also in that year. But the company that I was working with, I was not getting the role that I wanted to do. I wanted to do coaching more. I wanted to do, other things more, but I was stuck doing the same thing, like an HRBP role. I did not want to do that. I had never done that before. So I was literally like, this is not what I want to do. So I went on my own. I had a lot of types by then, that I was getting a lot of clients. I was getting a lot of resume clients. I was making more than what I was drawing in the salary. So I decided, okay, why don't I go independent? And that's when people should do, when you should not leave your job unless you are doing good so much that it covers your salary. That side hustle can become your full-time thing. So that's what I also tell other people. So if you want to make that transition, that's how it should be. You can't just one day decide, get up and decide that you want to do something else. And in fact, I'm just going a little off topic here. Many clients come to me that I want to do this role now. I've been doing this. I want to do this. It's not how it works, right? If you are a product manager and you can't get into sales suddenly, you have to transition to it slowly. And that's what I did. I slowly transitioned into it. I did recruitment for another 1 year. And then that's how I transitioned into a full-time career coach. So that's, that was my idea behind it. And when I started freelancing, I think, I just was focusing on how do I get more clients, how do I get more business. And that's how I'm here.
Right. And yeah, from whatever you're saying, building a business from scratch actually requires a lot of resilience, a lot of perseverance. So, could you share maybe a pivotal moment or a turning point in your journey when you felt particularly proud of how you handled adversity at that time?
So I'm gonna be very honest here, and I've been fortunate. I don't know, somehow I've been fortunate in this. I still, as an entrepreneur, I still get those sleepless nights sometimes. But I've been fortunate that I've got a lot of good people, good well wishers around me to give me business, and I have created that kind of. I don't want to sound like I'm posting about myself, but I've created that kind of image and relationships in the past that most of my past companies that I've worked with I'm still in touch with, and they give me business. So I've been fortunate enough that way. So I would say that the struggle is there, but if, because of this goodwill that I have, I've been fortunate to get ongoing business, repeat business, or whatever you want to call it. I get most of my resume clients that I get are word of mouth clients also, because some people who liked my work had shared. So that is so being an entrepreneur is not just about getting more business. How do you nurture that relationship? Repeat business that where you can get that. That's also important. So I think I have a long way to go, Jennifer. I'm just getting started. I feel that
Yeah.
I have a very small team. So I have a dream of giving employment now also myself, that I create more opportunities for people who can work with me and work towards towards the same goal that I have. I have very big dreams, and I want to, I still feel I have not done anything yet. So I want to achieve a lot, and I'm sure I will do that one day with the support that I have and with well wishers like you. So I think it's going to be it's tough, but I enjoy this. I enjoy this phase also, because I think when you challenge yourself, that's when you grow as well. Growth mindset is really important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what matters. That we are enthusiastic, we are passionate about what we are doing,
Yeah.
and one step at a time. And if you have that positive mindset, it will move towards where you want to move. So wonderful sharing that, Karishma. Looking back, of how these experiences, you've gone through these multiple experiences of losing a job, trying to introspect and find yourself, understanding what you want to do, figuring that out, um, creating your own business, to also on the personal front, challenges of COVID and losing your mom. So all these multiple experiences that you've had, how has all these shaped you personally and as well as professionally? What lessons have you learned of resilience, or maybe overcoming obstacles?
So one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that nothing is permanent, for because I lost my mom, and I'm kind of getting emotional when I talk about her. Uh, so nothing is permanent, and you can't be in that same position. You can't be the same person when what you were in the past, like past few years. So you have to keep changing. Change is the only constant that I always believe, and I say this to my clients as well, that you have to keep changing. So learning, upskilling is really important. So nothing is permanent, and of course, uh, you have to think about your future, in the sense, what do you want to achieve. Your goal is really important. So look at the goal, you will get the direction. And honestly, and I don't know how it happens, but whatever I think I want to do this, somehow I get some direction, that okay, something is happening around it. Like recently we were just thinking, where I think we need to have more clients in our recruitment business. And I just 2 days I just thought about it, I need to have more clients in my recruitment business. And the other day I got a call, okay, we have some positions, we have almost 10-15 positions to close in a month. So that's how it got. And I'm not saying it's magic, because my name means magic. It's just that whatever I think about that I want to achieve, it kind of happens. Which
Right.
so you need to have you need to have belief in yourself, believe in yourself. You have to have that self-belief. And entrepreneurs, or anyone for that matter, that the major challenge is that you have a lot of self-doubt. And even I do have that self-doubt, but uh, what overcomes is the self-belief. And you believe in yourself more than you doubt yourself, it helps you. So these are, I think, for now, this is what I can say, that these are really important lessons that I've learned.
And those are wonderful. I think everyone should have these kind of beliefs, because you go through so many ups and downs. You have to hold on to something strong to keep you grounded, to keep you motivated, so you can, move forward. And at every stage in life, you may or may not have a support system to lean on. And I think you need to have your own self there for you.
Exactly.
When you look into the mirror, you are there with you to take you
Exactly.
forward if nobody is there.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, what are some upcoming trends or changes in the job market that job seekers should be aware of, and how can they adapt to these changes effectively?
Okay, one of the biggest trend I would see is, a lot of people are not using it. In fact, uh, need to kind of to position yourself in the right way. You need to try to come more on camera. So you need to try to be a little different and create a video resume for that matter. Like in case your role requires you to uh, be talk to a lot of people, so that's a good way to present yourself. You're showing yourself as you can see, and that makes the recruiter's job also easier. Like when you see yourself, someone introducing themselves on a video, it's easier for me to gauge the person's communication, how they might interact with the client. So it's faster hiring process also for them. So go opt out for, go for a video resume. That's a very good way to stand out as well before even you get that call. So that is one trend that is picking up. Naukri.com, if you see, has that option. I'm sure other portals also, but I'm not used most of them. So I only use Naukri and LinkedIn. So you can create a small video of yourself when you're looking out for a job. You send it across rather than sending a resume. You send a small video resume. That will help you be more creative also, and you can stand out, and it makes it easier. So recruiters just have to pick up your phone and just call you and see if you're available for the interview. That's happening a lot in US, and slowly in India there are very few people who are doing it. IIM Jobs has this feature, so you have your video resume. So based on the role, I would suggest, not everyone doesn't have to go for it, but if you're in a sales role, yes, that would be a very good option for you to showcase your communication skills.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful thing, and everything is technology growing and moving towards that. So I think it would really help if we adapt to that. It was wonderful, wonderful speaking to you, Karishma, bringing all that bundle of knowledge, experience, and insights for us. Thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for calling me. Thank you so much.
That wraps up another insightful episode at Crossroad Conversation. We hope you gained valuable insights and actionable advice to turbocharge your job search journey. Remember, success in the job market is within your reach with the right strategies and mindset. Don't forget to use the tips and techniques shared on this episode to make your mark in the professional world. We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. And if you have someone who you would want me to invite on my podcast, mention it in the comments. And don't forget to share the wisdom by sharing this podcast with someone who might need a boost. Thank you for subscribing to Crossroad Conversation. Until next time, keep exploring perspectives and inspiring growth.